When my son passed away, everything changed in the blink of an eye. His wife, Madison, inherited our house in Charleston and $25 million in cash, then threw me out like yesterday's newspaper. "Frank, you're not welcome here anymore," she hissed, her cold voice echoing over the gravesite, as if she couldn't wait to get rid of me. "Go find somewhere else to rot." Some people gasped. Others, pretending not to hear, shuffled their feet awkwardly as the clouds threatened rain over that South Carolina cemetery. I stared down at my son's old-school photo, my callous thumb tracing the faded edges. Mark was gone at 46. Liver cancer, quick and cruel. 40 people, dressed in somber black, circled the grave, but I felt more alone than I'd ever been. Madison, now playing the perfect widow, complete with a black dress and a face painted with just enough sorrow, stood by the casket, her manicured hands clutching the wood like she'd already measured the house for new furniture. The minister tried to offer comfort, but it was hard to focus as Madison strutted over. "Frank, let's make this clear in front of everyone," she whispered, just loud enough for Mrs. Carter and the Wilsons to catch every word. "You'll need to be out by the end of the week. The house belongs to me now, and I'm not running a charity." There was venom behind her smile, a snake in designer shoes. I gripped Mark's photograph harder, anger boiling beneath the sadness. This was my son's home. It had been ours since the day we carried him through the front door, still wrapped in the hospital blanket. "It was your son's house," she sneered, lips curling with satisfaction. "Now it's mine, Frank. Mark left everything to me, and I'm going to enjoy it." The crowd shifted. Old friends, neighbors, Mark's baseball coach, even Pastor Davis, looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. I watched Madison return to her circle of friends, accepting their sympathy with the fake grace of a soap opera star. I felt more like an outsider than ever before. The casket was lowered, and I placed a single white rose, his mother's favorite, on the fresh dirt. The world felt smaller. But right then, I remembered Mark's words from his hospital bed, just weeks before. "Dad, you always took care of us. Don't worry, I made sure you're protected." I'd assumed he meant insurance or a bank account, but the look in his eyes suggested something deeper. Maybe he'd known how things might go after he was gone. By the time the crowd thinned out, the drizzle finally started, and I stayed behind until only the groundskeepers remained. I promised myself right then, I wasn't going to let Madison write the final chapter of my life. When I got to my old Chevy, my best friend, Tom Jenkins, was waiting beside his pickup. "Need a ride, old friend?" he said, his gravelly voice cutting through the tension. I nodded, swallowing what pride I had left. The drive to our house, now her house, felt like heading to an execution. The two-story white colonial on Oak Lane was once filled with laughter, arguments, and Thanksgiving dinners that stretched into midnight. Now, it looked like a stage set for someone else's show. Madison was already there, of course, her new luxury sedan gleaming in the driveway. She opened the front door as if expecting a delivery, not a grieving father-in-law. "Come in, everyone," she called to the handful of remaining mourners. "I've prepared a lovely reception for Mark." She was putting on a performance, the grieving widow playing hostess for the last time. My stomach twisted. As I walked through the house, it struck me that nothing felt familiar. Madison had swapped out our old photos for new ones, redecorated the living room, and filled the house with the scent of some expensive candle. I could feel the eyes of our neighbors on me, whispering, wondering what would become of the old man. We gathered in the parlor, her parlor now. Tom stood close, his presence a silent show of support. Madison poured wine with a flourish, every gesture signaling control. "To Mark, who took care of those he loved," she declared, raising her glass. I sipped water, fighting the urge to shout. I wanted to ask the crowd if anyone remembered when Mark built the back deck himself, when he lost his job and we scraped by together, when Madison was nowhere to be found. But I kept silent. Soon after, Madison's lawyer arrived, a sharp-dressed man named Eric Green, briefcase in hand, eyes sweeping the room for drama. He announced it was time to read the will, and everyone crowded into the den. Eric read the legalese, his voice calm, but I could feel Madison's anticipation vibrating beside me. When he finally said the words, "To my beloved wife, Madison Claire Evans, I leave the family home and $25 million," she let out a sigh of relief, almost giddy. But when it came to me? "To my father, Franklin Joseph Evans, I leave my old tools, family photographs, and nothing else." The words were a punch to the gut. After a lifetime of sacrifice, I was left with a box of memories. The crowd offered forced sympathy, while Madison basked in her victory. But I caught a strange look from Eric, the lawyer. A subtle nod, almost like he was telling me, "There's more to this than anyone realizes." I left the house in a daze, but as the rain fell harder, I knew the story wasn't over. Mark had been smart. I just had to figure out what he'd really planned. The next morning, I woke in a cheap motel room off the interstate. The air conditioner rattled with each gust, the scent of stale coffee and fried food lingering in the air. Everything I owned now fit into 2 duffel bags stacked by the door, 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, Mark's childhood photo, and a tool set old enough to remember Reagan. I stared at my reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, not sure whether to laugh or cry. Yesterday I was a father with a home. Today, just another lonely old man with nowhere to go. After a breakfast of burnt toast and black coffee from the lobby, I called Tom. "You holding up, Frank?" he asked, voice full of the kindness that always seemed to cut deeper in moments like these. "I'm hanging in. Madison's making good on her threats. I guess she always gets what she wants." Tom's sigh was heavy. "Listen, if you need a place, the guest room's yours." I thanked him, but pride is a funny thing. It kept me from accepting. "Let's see what happens after I talk to the lawyer." I took a bus downtown, clutching Mark's school photo in my pocket like a talisman. Eric Green's law office was a slick glass building wedged between a Wells Fargo and an overpriced coffee shop. Inside, everything was polished and cold, marble floors, chrome fixtures, a receptionist who barely looked up as I entered. Eric greeted me with a tight handshake and a knowing look. "Frank, I was hoping you'd come by," he said, ushering me into his office. He closed the door, dropped the lawyer act, and leaned forward, voice low. "I couldn't say anything yesterday, with Madison watching. But your son was a clever man, Frank. He anticipated situations just like this." My heart hammered in my chest. "What are you talking about?" Eric slid a thick folder across the desk. "There's a second part to Mark's will, an addendum only to be revealed if certain conditions were met." He paused, glancing at the closed door. "And well, Madison met those conditions faster than any of us expected." I gripped the armrest, not daring to hope. "Read this section," Eric said, pointing to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. I read aloud, barely trusting my voice. "All property and assets left to Madison Claire Evans are to remain in her name on the strict condition that she provides housing and dignified care for my father, Franklin Joseph Evans, for the remainder of his life. Should she fail in this obligation, all assets and property revert to the Mark Evans Foundation for Children's Hospitals." Eric met my eyes, steady and serious. "Frank, Madison kicked you out in front of witnesses. That's a clear violation. I recorded her words at the will reading and the funeral, just as Mark instructed. It was like the sun coming out after weeks of rain." "You mean, she loses everything?" Eric nodded. "The law's on your side. But I want you to be careful. People who feel a fortune slipping away can act desperate." I sat back, a weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time since the funeral, I allowed myself a real, honest-to-God smile. "Madison will be notified this afternoon," Eric continued. "But I want you to be present. Are you willing to come with me? More than willing, I said, feeling the steel return to my voice. Mark always said he had my back. He kept his word. We set the meeting for 4 o'clock. I spent the day walking through downtown Charleston, breathing in the river air, letting memories come and go. Mark's first Little League game, his first bike ride down Oak Lane, the way he'd smile when he finally got something right after trying a dozen times. For all Madison's schemes, she'd never have those memories. By the time Eric picked me up in his gray Ford sedan, a storm was threatening on the horizon. We pulled up to the old house on Oak Lane, now, perhaps, about to be mine again, in some strange twist of fate. Eric carried the official documents. I carried hope. Madison answered the door in sweatpants and a silk robe, her hair up in a messy bun. The moment she saw me and Eric together, suspicion flashed in her eyes. "What's this about?" she demanded, arms folded. Eric's voice was all business. "Mrs. Evans, there's a legal matter concerning your late husband's estate. May we come in?" She hesitated, but couldn't resist the pull of authority and the need to stay in control. "Fine. But make it quick." We sat in the living room where so many birthday parties and holidays had taken place. Madison paced, restless as a caged cat. "Is this about the house? The money? I already have the paperwork." Eric cut her off gently, pulling out the second will. "It's about a clause you may have overlooked." He laid the document before her, pointing to the highlighted paragraph. As Madison read, her face paled, lips tightening, eyes flicking back and forth across the legal text. "This is a joke," she said finally, voice shaking. "He wouldn't do this. He promised me." Eric didn't budge. "It's legally binding. You violated the terms by evicting Mr. Evans and failing to provide dignified care. The entire inheritance reverts to the foundation effective immediately." Madison looked at me, not with triumph now, but with pure, helpless rage. "You did this. You and your precious son. You think you've won?" For the first time, I felt nothing but pity for her. "I didn't do anything, Madison. Mark did what he thought was right." She staggered to the window, clutching the curtain, her world crumbling. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hall, a clock that had watched over generations of Evans men. Eric cleared his throat. "You may remain here as a tenant, under new terms set by the foundation. Or you may leave. But the decision is no longer yours." Madison crumpled into a chair, defeated. For a moment, I remembered the young woman Mark had married, bright and hopeful, before greed and bitterness took over. But now, the past belonged to memory, and the future, for the first time in days, belonged to me. As Eric and I left the house, I glanced back at the porch, at the battered swing where Mark and I used to drink lemonade in the summers. I felt him there somehow, a quiet presence urging me forward. Tomorrow, everything would change. But for tonight, I was going to let myself sleep without fear. I didn't sleep much that night, despite the victory. Memories kept me company. The sound of Mark's laughter echoing in the backyard, the way the old house on Oak Lane glowed with Christmas lights every winter. I tried to picture what would come next. Would Madison fight back? Would I really feel at home in a place now tainted with betrayal and grief? The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror, splashed cold water on my face, and straightened my shirt. Tom called just after sunrise. "Frank, you doing all right?" "I'm getting there, Tom. The lawyer says it's official. Madison lost it all. Everything goes to the foundation if she doesn't treat me right." Tom let out a low whistle. "Never thought I'd see the day. You need anything, you let me know, you hear?" "Thanks, Tom. For everything. Friends like him are rare." I promised myself I wouldn't waste whatever time I had left being bitter. By noon, the house was buzzing with news. Madison's world unraveled quickly. The word spread through Charleston faster than a hurricane warning. Mrs. Carter called to ask if it was true. The Wilsons offered me pie and advice. Even Pastor Davis stopped by, all awkward sympathy and genuine concern. Madison, meanwhile, had retreated into the master bedroom, curtains drawn tight, ignoring calls and knocking. I kept my distance, out of respect, and maybe a little bit of self-preservation. She'd lost more than just money, she'd lost her illusion of control. In the afternoon, Eric returned to finalize paperwork with a representative from the Mark Evans Foundation. She was a brisk woman named Sheila Grant, all business and no nonsense, but she smiled when she shook my hand. "Mr. Evans, we're honored to have you remain here as our resident. The Foundation's mission is to continue Mark's legacy of helping families, starting with his own." Something loosened in my chest. Mark had built this house on more than bricks and wood. He'd built it on love and sacrifice and hard work. Now, even gone, he was still watching over me. Sheila laid out the new arrangement. I could stay for the rest of my life, provided I maintained the home and kept up the family's charitable traditions. Madison, if she chose to remain, would receive a small stipend, but only as long as she treated everyone in the house with respect and dignity. "She has a week to decide," Sheila said quietly, glancing upstairs. "But from now on, you're the priority." It was the first time in years that someone had said those words to me. I felt younger, lighter, like the world was full of possibility again. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the tall pines, I sat on the back porch with a cup of coffee, letting the breeze wash away months of worry. I heard cautious footsteps behind me, Madison. She stepped out, her hair pulled back, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. For the first time since Mark's funeral, she looked less like a villain and more like a wounded human being. "Frank," she began, voice trembling, "I know I've said things I shouldn't have. Done things I regret." She stared at her hands, twisting a ring Mark had given her. "I never expected it to turn out like this. I thought I deserved everything. That's what Mark promised." I took a slow sip, weighing my words. Sometimes life surprises us. Sometimes the people we love see things coming we can't imagine. Mark was a good son. He wanted to protect both of us. Madison shook her head, tears welling up. "I was angry. I felt alone. I took it out on you because I didn't know how else to fight back." I let her words hang in the quiet air. Forgiveness is a strange thing, harder to give than to receive, but more freeing than either. "We've both lost a lot," I said softly. "But we're not done living. Maybe there's still a way forward if you want it." She looked up, startled, as if she'd expected nothing but condemnation. "Would you really let me stay?" I nodded. "This house isn't about money or ownership. It's about family." Mark made sure of that. We sat in silence, broken only by the chirp of crickets and the hum of faraway traffic. I felt the tension between us ease, just a bit. The next days passed quietly. Sheila's team came to inventory the property and assess what needed repairs. I spent mornings tending the rose bushes out front, the same ones Mark's mother had planted decades ago. In the afternoons, I cleaned out the garage, rediscovering old fishing rods and boxes of Mark's childhood toys. Sometimes Madison joined me, dusting shelves or sorting through photographs, her anger dulled, her movements slow and careful. At night, I'd walk through the old house, touching door frames, remembering the laughter and arguments, the birthdays and Christmas mornings. This house was full of echoes, but it was full of hope, too. On the fifth day, as I was fixing the screen door on the back porch, Madison came outside, clutching a letter in her hand. "Frank, you have a visitor." I glanced up, surprised. Standing behind her was Eric, the lawyer, and behind him, someone I never expected to see. It was Madison's younger brother, Sam, fresh off a red-eye from Chicago, suitcase in hand and worry in his eyes. He looked at his sister, then at me, then back at Madison. "I heard what happened. I came as fast as I could." Madison broke down in tears, and for the first time in a long time, I saw her as someone's child, someone in need of family, just as much as I was. Eric put a gentle hand on my shoulder. Mr. Evans, your family's not as small as you thought. I nodded, blinking away the tears. For the first time since Mark died, I felt truly at home. Sam's arrival changed the mood of the house. He was Madison's younger brother by 7 years, quick-witted and soft-spoken, the kind of man who rarely raised his voice but always got people to listen. When he hugged Madison in the entryway, she finally broke down for real, sobbing into his chest like a little girl. I watched quietly from the kitchen, remembering my own sister long gone, and the comfort family can bring when the world seems to crumble. Uncle Frank, Sam said, using the nickname Mark had insisted on years ago. I'm so sorry for what you've gone through. I didn't know it was this bad. I shrugged, hiding the ache in my bones. We're surviving. Mark looked out for me. That's more than most get. For the next 2 days, Sam stayed in the guest room, sleeping off the exhaustion of his trip and spending long hours with Madison behind closed doors. Sometimes I heard their voices raised, sometimes anger, sometimes grief. Other times, it was just the soft murmur of siblings trying to patch together the past. I kept myself busy in the garden, trimming back the wild hedges, letting the rhythm of honest work settle my thoughts. On the third morning, Sam found me on the back porch, a mug of coffee cooling in my hands. He sat down beside me, his face serious. Uncle Frank, Madison wants to apologize properly. To you. She knows she can't take back what's been said, but she's ready to make things right if you'll let her. I considered that for a long moment. I'd lost count of the number of times I'd forgiven family over the years, for mistakes big and small. But this was something different. This was betrayal at the deepest level. Still, Mark would have wanted peace, not bitterness. I'll listen, I said finally. No promises beyond that. Sam nodded and called his sister out. Madison looked different than she had at the funeral. Her pride had softened, and the anger in her eyes was gone. She sat down on the step, facing me, hands twisting a napkin in her lap. Frank, I was wrong, she said, her voice trembling. I let grief make me cruel. I thought the money, the house, all of it, would fill the hole Mark left. But it only made me empty. You deserved better. Mark deserved better from me. I watched her closely. There was no performance this time, no audience to impress, just the quiet confession of someone at the end of their rope. I nodded. You lost him too, Madison. Grief does strange things. But this house, Mark's legacy, isn't built on greed. It's built on love, and you're still part of that, if you want to be. She looked up, tears on her cheeks. I do. I really do. She stood and hesitantly wrapped her arms around me. For the first time since Mark died, the hug felt real. With Madison's apology came a slow transformation. She began to participate in the daily life of the house again, joining me and Sam for meals, working side by side to sort through boxes in the attic, even cooking Mark's favorite chili recipe one night, laughing through tears at how badly she burned the first batch. It was awkward, and it was healing. But not everything went smoothly. Word of Madison's loss had gotten out, and soon old friends began circling like sharks smelling blood in the water. Realtors left business cards in the mailbox. An old college acquaintance called, offering to help her invest what little remained. Even her estranged father reached out from California, full of sudden concern and thinly veiled questions about the inheritance. One afternoon, I caught Madison at the kitchen table, reading a letter with shaking hands. I poured her a glass of iced tea and sat down. What is it? She slid the letter across the table. It's from Tom Riley, the guy Mark once hired to run the warehouse. He's heard about the change in ownership. Says he wants to buy the house for cash and let me move into one of his apartments for free. Think about your future, Madison, he writes. You're not safe with strangers in that old house. Take the deal. I shook my head, anger flaring. He's looking out for himself, not you. This house is your home as long as you need it, as long as you show respect. Don't let desperation talk you into anything. She nodded, relief flooding her face. Thank you, Frank. I don't know why I ever thought you were the enemy. That night, as the sun set in a blaze of orange over the marsh, we all sat out on the porch, me, Madison, Sam, watching the fireflies blink in the twilight. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and cut grass. We talked about Mark, his stubbornness, his terrible taste in music, his fierce loyalty. For the first time, laughter returned to the old house. A few days later, Sheila from the foundation stopped by to check in. She watched us through the screen door, her lips curving in a satisfied smile. Looks like things are settling down, she said. You all have a real chance here. Don't waste it. I promised her we wouldn't. The house had found its balance again. Not the same as before, but perhaps, in a way, something stronger. Still, I knew peace could be fragile, and in the weeks ahead, it would be tested in ways none of us could imagine. For a while, life in the house on Oak Lane felt almost peaceful. Sam took over the repairs Mark never had time for, fixing the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom, painting the front steps, patching the sagging section of roof. Madison and I settled into an uneasy but genuine truce, learning to share quiet breakfasts and the odd evenings spent watching old movies on the worn leather couch. The silence was different now, no longer sharp or cold, but full of cautious hope. But just as we started to breathe again, trouble came knocking. It started one afternoon when Madison came back from a trip to the grocery store, her face pale as chalk. She set her keys down on the counter and handed me a manila envelope, her hands shaking. This came for you, she said quietly. A man in a suit delivered it by hand. Wouldn't say who he was. My stomach twisted as I opened it. Inside was a formal letter from a law firm in Atlanta, one I didn't recognize. The letter was direct and cold. Dear Mr. Evans, we represent the estate of Peter McDowell, who claims a debt owed by the late Mark Evans in the amount of $183,000, secured by a promissory note against the property at 421 Oak Lane. Immediate payment is required, or legal action will commence to seize the property. I let out a low whistle and passed the letter to Sam, who read it twice, then muttered a curse under his breath. Mark never said anything about a loan like this. Did you know? I shook my head, heart pounding. Mark never mentioned anything. He always said the house was paid off. Sam set his jaw. This doesn't feel right. I'll call Eric. Let's not panic yet. Madison sank into a chair, pressing her fingers to her temples. I can't lose this house, Frank. I just can't. I know it's not mine anymore, but it's all I have left of Mark. I wanted to comfort her, but my own worries took over. That night, I sat up late in the den, the letter spread before me, thinking of every time I'd watched Mark sign a check or pay a bill. He'd always been proud of his independence, hated owing anyone anything. Something about this stank of a scam. The next morning, Eric came by with stacks of paperwork and an air of determination. He'd already started digging. You're right to be suspicious, he said, laying out copies of property records. There's no record of any lien or debt with this McDowell name attached. And no promissory note registered at the county courthouse. Madison's eyes widened. So what do we do? Eric smiled for the first time in days. We fight back. I'll send a letter demanding proof. In the meantime, don't respond to anything from them. Not a word. With Eric on the case, some of the fear ebbed, but the house felt less like a sanctuary and more like a fortress under siege. Every day brought new mail, more letters from debt collectors, one even threatening to take Mark's old truck if we didn't pay $8,000 in overdue repair bills. I started keeping a file for each threat, paper clipping them in neat stacks, determined not to let worry get the better of me. Madison, to her credit, didn't retreat. She started spending more time with the Foundation volunteers, organizing a charity dinner in Mark's honor. She even invited Sam and me to join her. The house buzzed with activity, Sheila and her team decorating the backyard, Madison in the kitchen planning the menu, Sam stringing lights through the oak trees. For one evening, the shadows of grief and legal battles faded, replaced by laughter and music under the stars. At the dinner, I stood at the edge of the crowd, a plate of barbecue in my hand, watching Madison make her first real speech since Mark died. She spoke about love, forgiveness, and how Mark had believed in second chances. For the first time, I saw people nodding, not just out of politeness, but real understanding. Even I felt my guard drop. But peace was short-lived. A few days later, a stranger appeared at the front door, a heavy-set man in a cheap suit, eyes shifting constantly, a folder tucked under one arm. He introduced himself as Ronald Blake from the Asset Recovery Group, and flashed a badge that looked just a little too shiny to be real. "I'm here about the debts on this property," he said smoothly. "We have reason to believe there's been fraudulent activity regarding the estate. If you cooperate, we can resolve this quickly." I let him talk, listening carefully as he tried to pressure me into signing documents. For the sake of the investigation. When he asked to see the original will, I shook my head. "You'll talk to our attorney. No signatures today." He didn't like that, his smile slipping. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Evans. Things could get difficult for you." I closed the door gently in his face, locking it behind me. Then I called Eric. Another one just showed up. They're getting bolder. Eric was at the house within the hour, documents in hand, calling the bluff of every scammer who dared to show up. He also called the police, who agreed to keep an eye on the neighborhood and warned us to expect more of these vultures. Through it all, the family pulled together. Sam took shifts watching the house at night. Madison baked cookies for the local officers. I started sleeping better, knowing that Mark's legacy, his real legacy, the strength of the people he'd left behind, was proving stronger than any scammer's threat. One night, as I tucked away the last of the scam letters into a locked drawer, I looked around the quiet house, feeling the weight and comfort of its old walls. Maybe we'd never have total peace. But as long as we stood together, I knew we could withstand anything. Weeks slipped by, and as the days grew longer, the house on Oak Lane slowly settled into something like peace. Madison seemed lighter than she had in years. She volunteered regularly at the foundation, organized food drives, even started coaching a girls' softball team at the local rec center. Sam got a job offer from a construction firm in town, which meant, for the first time in a long time, he was thinking of staying for good. For my part, I found comfort in old routines. I fixed the rickety back fence, sanded and refinished Mark's old workbench, and spent long afternoons sharing coffee with Tom out on the porch. For a while, we could almost pretend things were normal. But nothing is ever really that simple. One Thursday afternoon, just as Madison was leaving for a foundation meeting, her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something told her to answer. The voice on the other end was cold and familiar. "Madison, it's your father. We need to talk." Madison's face drained of color. She stepped outside and shut the door behind her. For years, she and her father had barely spoken. He'd always been distant, more interested in his investments and image than family. But now, with news of the inheritance and the mess that followed, he'd found a new reason to reach out. "I hear you're in trouble," he said, not unkindly but with a transactional edge. "I can help, if you're willing to sell the house. I have some buyers, New Yorkers, cash offers. Think about it. You'd never have to worry again." Madison's hands trembled. "Dad, the house isn't mine to sell. Mark left it in a trust for the foundation. I'm lucky just to be living here. A sigh on the line. You always did settle for less than you deserve. Call me when you're ready to be practical. He hung up without a goodbye. She came back inside, shaken but resolute. For the rest of the day, she was quieter, as if that phone call reminded her that family isn't just about blood, it's about loyalty, forgiveness, and who stands with you when the storm comes. That evening, Sam noticed her mood. You okay? She nodded, managing a thin smile. Yeah. I just realized something. I'm exactly where I need to be. As the weekend approached, Sheila from the foundation called an emergency meeting at the house. The scammers had grown bolder. One had even posed as a building inspector, trying to access the attic. The police had warned her that someone might try to forge documents and force a sale. Sheila sat us all around the kitchen table, her voice firm. Here's the plan. We're putting an alarm system on every door and window. I've also arranged for a notary to review all estate paperwork with you. No one gets in or out without your permission. The foundation's lawyer is staying in town until this is over. Sam grinned. It's like Home Alone, but with more paperwork. For the next week, the house felt like a fortress. Police cars made regular passes down Oak Lane. Sheila's legal team combed through every document. Madison set up a system to verify every phone call and visitor. Word must have gotten out, because soon the letters and threats stopped. One by one, the scammers faded away, finding easier prey elsewhere. But just when it seemed like the crisis had passed, one last test remained. Late one evening, a battered blue sedan pulled up in front of the house. I watched from the window as a woman stepped out, a face I hadn't seen in years. It was Mark's old business partner, Carla Foster. She'd been with him since his first job, but they parted ways after a falling out over money. She rang the bell, clutching a small envelope. When Madison opened the door, Carla's voice trembled. I heard about Mark. I wasn't there for the funeral. I'm sorry. I wanted to give this back. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note from Mark, dated years before, and a check for $10,000, money Mark had lent her when her husband was sick. I finally sold my house, Carla whispered, tears in her eyes. Mark saved my family when no one else would. I should have come sooner. Madison hugged her tightly. Your family here. You always have been. The next morning, I sat on the porch with Carla, catching up over coffee. She talked about Mark's generosity, how he always believed in second chances. Her story reminded me what mattered most, not the money, or even the house, but the lives Mark had touched, the love he'd left behind. That afternoon, the sun shone warm on the old bricks and white trim of the Evans house. Madison came outside, her arm linked with Carla's, Sam close behind. For the first time in months, I saw the house as Mark must have imagined it, a place of shelter, memory, and hope. We stood together in the yard as the breeze rustled the magnolia trees, and I realized Mark's greatest gift wasn't the money or the house. It was the family, broken, bruised, but learning to heal together. There was just one chapter left before the story came full circle. Spring gave way to early summer, and life at the house on Oak Lane finally felt settled. The worst of the storms had passed, both the ones outside and the ones inside our hearts. The foundation's legal team closed every loophole, every scammer faded away, and for the first time in months, we felt safe in our own home. Sam accepted the job offer in Charleston. He moved into a small apartment across town, but he was always around for Sunday dinners or to help with repairs. Madison kept busy at the foundation and the rec center, her laughter slowly returning as she rebuilt her sense of self. Even Carla found a new beginning, staying with us a while before moving to a little house of her own down the street. One bright June morning, Sheila called everyone together for a meeting in the backyard. The magnolias were in full bloom, sunlight glittering on the old porch swing. It's time, she said with a smile. to celebrate Mark's true legacy. We held a garden party, something Mark would have loved. Old friends, neighbors, foundation volunteers, and even some of the folks Mark had quietly helped over the years filled the yard. There were paper lanterns hanging from the oak trees, tables loaded with food, and photos of Mark throughout his life lining the fence. Before the meal, I stood by the porch and cleared my throat. Everyone turned to listen, faces both familiar and new. "I want to thank all of you for being here," I began, voice steady but thick with emotion. "When I lost my son, I thought I lost my place in the world. But Mark had a bigger plan. He knew this house wasn't just wood and nails. It was love and memory and hope for something better. He gave us a second chance, to be a family again, in every sense of the word." I paused, meeting Madison's eyes. "None of us are perfect. We've all been lost in the dark. But we're here together. Mark's legacy isn't money or even this house. It's the way we care for each other when it matters most." Madison stepped up beside me, her voice steady as she addressed the group. "I made mistakes," she said plainly. "I thought losing Mark meant I had to fight for every scrap left behind. But I was wrong. I'm grateful every day for the forgiveness I've found here. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, all of you." The crowd applauded, and for the first time, Madison's smile reached her eyes. Afterwards, Sheila made the official announcement. "Starting this fall, the Evans Foundation will fund a new community garden and scholarship program in Mark's name, right here in Charleston. This house will be the center of it, a place for anyone who needs help, or hope, or just a good meal." People mingled, swapping stories and memories. Sam fired up the grill. Carla led a group of kids in planting the first flowers for the new garden. I sat on the porch, content, as the sun dipped low and fireflies began to twinkle. As twilight settled, Madison sat beside me on the old swing. "Frank, do you think Mark would be proud?" I looked at her, at the woman who'd once thrown me out, and the woman who now called this house home in a different, deeper way. "He'd be more than proud, Madison. He'd be happy. That's all any of us can ask for." She nodded, tears shining but no longer bitter. "Thank you for giving me another chance." I smiled, placing a hand over hers. "Thank Mark. He saw the best in both of us." As laughter and music drifted from the yard, I realized that the true inheritance was never about money. It was about faith, forgiveness, and the bonds we build and rebuild when life tries to break us apart. That night, before bed, I looked at the old photo of Mark in his baseball cap, grinning wide and fearless. I whispered, "We're all right, son. You did good. You took care of us, just like you promised." And as the house on Oak Lane settled into gentle darkness, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. Not just for me, but for all of us. The story wasn't just about what we lost, but what we found again. Family. Hope. A future worth sharing. Some victories really are worth waiting for.